The Island of Dr. Moreau, the most disastrous movie ever made. I've never heard of the movie. Is it good?
Is the most outrageous spectacle I have ever witnessed.
You know, making a movie is a pretty complicated business when you think about it. Like a car engine, a whole bunch of different components have to work in harmony to produce the desired results. And just like a car engine, especially mine, the potential for fuck-ups and breakdowns is never far away. Whether it's studio interference, clashing egos on set, logistical problems, incompetent directors, spiraling budgets, or scripts that
just looking at this movie is making me uncomfortable.
Rewritten on the fly. The possibilities to derail a production are practically endless. But sometimes, just sometimes, all of these different elements manage to join forces into some unholy union of shittiness to wreak absolute havoc on everyone involved. And one film in particular stands above all the rest as the undisputed king of Bullshit Mountain. A movie that will forever live in infamy as one of the most difficult,
I've never heard of it. I love shit movies.
Unintentionally hilarious disasters ever committed to film. And that movie is The Island of Dr. Moreau. It's legitimately one of the worst
I need to look it up. Let me
I've ever seen.
I've never heard of this. I have literally heard of every dog shit movie ever made, even movies that no one's ever seen, like Let's Be Evil. And I've never heard this. This must be very old. It's not very old. It's 1996. Which I guess is actually kind of old now, which is really upsetting. Oh, Val Kilmer's in this piece of shit. Wait, Marlon Brando. Okay. I've never heard of this thing.
Seen in my entire life. But in this case, what went on behind the scenes of this film is even more interesting than the turd which made it onto cinemas in 1996. And because I could do with a good old laugh today, I thought it might be interesting to chronicle just how exactly this disaster
I'm not watching it.
unfolded.
I'll watch this review
so
of it.
Grab your pint of tequila and let us journey together into the heart of darkness. The Island of Dr. Moreau is based off a 19th century novel by H.G. Wells about a mad scientist who fuses together humans and animals to create a race of horrifying hybrids that exhibit
kind of like in
the
Spy Kids 2 with
characteristics of
Steve
both,
Buscemi.
but the intellect of neither. Kind of like the women from Dundee. Fuck,
I don't get the
man,
reference.
I've had some bad nights there, let me tell you. Anyway, the book eventually came to the attention of a South African director named Richard Stanley, who made it his mission to write and direct a modern movie adaptation. After spending years working on the project, he approached New Line Cinema, who eventually gave him the green light and a hefty budget of $40 million to make it work.
Not
They were even able
bad.
to get legendary actor Marlon Brando on board. Mostly because his career was on the downturn and he needed a paycheck. Those Krispy Kremes aren't going to pay for themselves, you know. Bringing him in would prove to be both the best and worst decision that New Line ever made. See, being able to say that you've starred in a movie opposite Marlon Brando is a pretty fucking cool thing to put on your resume.
That would be pretty cool.
It was pretty obvious that particular window of opportunity was closing rapidly.
Man,
As
the
a
costuming, it reminds me of Sexy Beasts on A&E, where they put people into, like, the most weird costumes imaginable. Like, this one's like some kind of weird fucking Hills Have Eyes, Kid Rock kind of thing going on. Good lord.
Pretty obvious that particular window of opportunity was closing rapidly. As a result, Bruce Willis and James Woods both signed on for the movie. Nice one, chaps. But that's when shit started to go wrong. Willis's marriage to Demi Moore was falling apart, forcing him to drop out so he could start a messy divorce. His replacement was none other than Val Kilmer, who already had a reputation for being one of the biggest assholes in Hollywood, and
I didn't know
would go on
that.
to cement that legacy with his behaviour on this film. In fact, his dickishness on set reached such levels that this movie basically derailed his entire career. The other big problem was that Kilmer was only willing to do the bare minimum in terms of shooting days, which forced Stanley to recast him as a supporting character and fire James Woods to make way for him. With no other big names willing to get involved, Rob Morrow was hastily recast in the main role. But drinker, you pugnacious pugilist of prose, I hear you say. This is nothing new. Movies often go through last-minute casting changes, and sometimes it works out for the best. What's the big deal this time? Well, my sadly optimistic friend, this shit's just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to the island of Dr. Moreau.
Yeah, it doesn't sound shitty yet.
Began once the cameras started rolling. Just as filming kicked off in the Australian jungle, Marlon Brando's daughter suddenly passed away, forcing him to abandon the shoot to go away and deal with it. With no clue about when or even if he would come back, the only option was to start shooting the scenes he wasn't in and just hope for the best. That's when Val Kilmer found out that his wife was divorcing him when she announced it on a fucking TV interview. Naturally,
that is a cool way of doing it.
Get the fuck out of there, but the studio refused to release him from his contract, which left him stuck in a kind of cinematic purgatory until the film was finished. Now, a different
it helps
man
keep his
might
mind
have
off of
handled this
things, though, to
development
be
with
fair.
Dignity and professionalism, stoically doing his job and fulfilling his obligations no matter the personal difficulties. Val Kilmer, however, was not such a man. Instead, he immediately began causing problems on set, showing up late every day, refusing to learn his lines, bullying and abusing the cast and crew around him, and clashing with the director over basically every decision. Meanwhile, tropical storms hammered the entire area, damaging the sets and forcing more delays while they were repaired.
Well, they could definitely have filmed that for the movie, I'm sure.
All this, and Stanley's tactic of refusing to take their calls or give them any kind of clue about what was happening didn't exactly help the situation. Needless to say, the atmosphere quickly became more toxic than a Reddit political thread, and morale deteriorated to the point where Rob Morrow broke down in tears and begged the studio to release him from his contract.
Maybe he's just a very sensitive guy.
They also decided to release the director from a movie that was rapidly spiraling out of control. His reaction was something along the lines of, "Okay, fuck you then." In retaliation,
is that actually what the director looks like? Well, I need to look up the director now. I feel like this would have been a big director with this kind of crew, but I've never seen that guy in my life. I'd remember him. Richard Stanley. What has he made? He's still wearing that cowboy hat. He looks like a stripper you'd hire. What's he got in his resume? Having a hard time loading. There we go. He recently directed Color Out of Space. Looks like a pretty trippy thing. A secluded farm is struck by a meteorite. Dope. So his career's still booming?
His production notes, scripts, and every important document that he could get his hands on. Then he promptly lost his mind, suffered a complete mental breakdown, and vanished into the Australian jungle. Okay. But what makes this thing even more awesome is that he was eventually able to sneak back on set as an extra, disguised in heavy makeup, so that he could spy on the production he'd been forced out of. He even blagged his way into the rap party, just so that he could tell Val Kilmer what a shithead he'd been. What's a legend? He wasn't the only one to leave either. Fairuza Balk, the lead actress, decided she'd had enough of this shit and tried to make a run for it, only to be caught at the airport in Sydney and forced to go back to the set.
How do they force her to go back?
Prisoner of war camps are easier to escape from than this movie. Anyway, with tens of millions of dollars wasted and nothing of value accomplished, John
Surely she can
Frankenheimer
just
was
void the
eventually brought in
contract.
as director on the agreement that he got complete control and a 3-picture deal of his own. Basically, he didn't give a shit about this film, but it was a chance to get his own projects off the ground and work with Marlon Brando, so he was like, yeah, whatever. Speaking of which, when Brando eventually showed up again, he immediately went to war with Val Kilmer. See, it turns out that having two awkward, prickly,
Kilmer
self-absorbed
sounds
assholes
cool.
that are difficult to work with, starring opposite each other, isn't a recipe for success. It would be like trying to make a movie today
Let's do some
starring
smalls.
two Brie Larsons. They quickly came to hate each other and did everything in their power to fuck each other over and sabotage the movie. Kilmer because he was locked into a contract he desperately wanted out
Does
of.
he do anything
and
anymore,
Brando
Val
because
Kilmer?
He was
Does he actually
guaranteed
just
to get paid no matter how little work
gone?
he actually did. They were so fucking petty that neither man was willing to leave his makeup trailer before the other, leaving the cast and crew waiting for hours in the searing tropical heat for them to show up. Nice work, you dicks. Frankenheimer hated Kilmer so
my God,
much
there's still
that
4
as soon
minutes.
as he filmed his last scene, he brought in security men to escort him off set, told him to fuck off and never come near him again. Brando, meanwhile, couldn't be arsed learning his lines and relied on a concealed microphone to get him through his scenes, which was just fine until it started picking up transmissions on local police frequencies. He gave so little of a shit that he'd actually just repeat them as if they were lines from the script.
That's fucking awesome.
He also came up with the genius idea for his character to wear an ice bucket on his head because it was hot and he was morbidly obese. And because everyone was scared he'd quit the movie if they challenged him, there it stayed, in all its glory, an eternal monument to one man's bloated vanity and hubris. At the other end of the spectrum, the
That's
world's
so fucking
smallest
cool.
man
It sounds like he
even
made
got
the movie
his
better.
reaction.
Good for him.
Because Marlon Brando had become kind of obsessed with him for some reason, he demanded that he got more screen time, forcing them to come up with random scenes
He's
like
Prime
this
Maddie
to
and
give
there's
him
a
something
substance,
to do.
Chillowisp.
The power quickly went to his head though, and he repeatedly harassed and propositioned female extras through the use of his interpreter, who also happened to be his sister. It's not often that the drinker is left speechless by something, but there you go. This movie must have been fucking wild, man. Anyway, production eventually
Do I know about the
dragged
Fast
on
and
for
Furious
6
contracts?
agonizing
No.
months. Just imagine that for a moment if you can. 6 months stuck in the middle of the Australian jungle with a bunch of people who hate each other and are actively working to prevent the project from getting finished. Cast and crew became increasingly mutinous.
I didn't want to
as the
watch
months
this movie
dragged
now.
on. People walked off
I think it'll be
set
fucking
and never
boring.
returned, and the survivors ended up having wild drug and alcohol-fueled orgies in the jungle at night to pass the time. Like, imagine if this was your first experience of the movie industry. You show up on set, all excited and enthusiastic for your first job, only to find yourself facing...
This seems like it's getting into dangerous territory there. I haven't seen the movie, but I don't want to take the chance either. Seems like a classic, though. So does Val Kilmer really not do anything anymore? I assumed I just don't watch his movies. But it looks like he genuinely doesn't do anything anymore. Well, he's in the new Top Gun. Seems like he's doing just fine. Thanks for some young monsters. Spotify's most streamed songs, each song length is too short for DMCA. That is not how DMCA works. It doesn't matter how long. Oh, I see. The movie traumatized you as a kid. Yeah, it looks pretty fucking weird. The costuming looks really goofy. Buzkashi. It's the greatest